Today's gospel lesson is a popular sermon reference for several reasons. It's pretty easy to understand. It's certainly been widely used and taught in Sunday school classes from childhood through adulthood. And because of its popularity, some of you have probably heard a sermon or two preached about this parable of the seeds. Jesus talks about a farmer who goes out and scattered his seeds. But it's where the seeds land, you see, that becomes the object lesson of this parable. Jesus tells us that the seeds fell in four distinct places. Some fell by the wayside. Some fell on rocks. Some fell among thorns. And of course, some thankfully fell on good ground. And Jesus explains his parable this way. The seeds, you see, represent the Word of God. And where the seeds fall can be likened to certain kinds of people. A story about a man who's digging a hole one day, while at the same time his friend standing right next to him is covering up the same hole. And so they spend the entire day. One digs and the other one covers it up. Being curious, a passerby who can no longer keep quiet while watching this unusual scene approaches the two men and asks, "Gentlemen," he says, "what exactly are you doing?" "Well, we're working," one of them answers. "And are you positive there's nothing wrong with what you're doing?" "Well, if there is something wrong," one of them replied, "it's Pedro's fault. He didn't show up today." "And who's Pedro?" asked the passerby. "Oh, he's the guy who sows the seed." Must have been a government job. Obviously, the sower of the seed is an important part of planting a crop. But Jesus tells us it's where the seed lands that has a whole lot to do with how the seed grows. I'm not so sure that this parable ought not to be called the parable of the soil. In reality, Jesus is not talking about the sower of the seed, not the one delivering the word of God, but rather, you see, the soil, in essence, the hearer of the word. And it's the hearer of the word and what he does with what he hears, how he or she responds about taking the good news of Jesus Christ and putting those words into their lives so that what they hear can make a real difference in what they do. In today's lesson, Jesus begins by talking about seeds that fall by the wayside. Now, just what kind of folks do those seeds represent? Well, we ought to recognize them because we see them every day. These are the kinds of people who are intelligent enough to understand what the love of Jesus Christ is all about, and yet they don't respond. The seeds of salvation just seem to bounce right off. In many cases, their total outlook on life and the love of Christ seems to have been hardened by the devil. You see, they're allowing some kind of outside condition to harden their souls, just as the desert winds harden the sands of the Sahara. I don't like the church. They've mistreated me, and I'm not going to forgive them. I don't like the preacher. Seems like he's always preaching about me. I don't feel comfortable there. They don't do things my way, so to heck with them. I don't need them. I don't need any of this Jesus stuff to complicate my life. Well, maybe, just maybe, that person doesn't really want to be a part of anything. There's something going on in that person's life that is distracting them to the point that they cannot have a true relationship with Jesus Christ. They simply don't have the soil that's going to allow anything to grow. Then Jesus said, there are those seeds that fall on rocks. These are the kinds of people who hear, often even receive the Word of God, sometimes with joy. But there's no root system that will allow their seeds to flourish. They get excited for a short time, but then you see they just slowly fade away. There's just not enough nutrition to keep the plant alive. We see folks like this start out with a real bang, and when the going gets tough, when the real commitment has to be made, they fold up. Those are the kind of folks that think that Christianity is all about joy and happiness, and when trials and tribulations crop up in their lives, they don't know what to do. You see, they don't have the simple, abiding faith that real, committed Christians enjoy, the kind of faith that remains supportive even in the worst of times. I suppose faith means different things to different people. Here's some lines that were found scrawled on a cellar wall in Cologne, which was destroyed by bombing in World War II. The word said, I believe in the sun even when it's not shining. I believe in love even when I don't feel it. And I believe in God even when He's silent. Jesus also described the seeds that fell among thorns. Such people are the ones who hear God's words but are so choked up with the worries or pleasures of life that they never come to fruition. They may have great intentions, but there's some distraction that simply will not allow them to stay focused on Jesus Christ. Ministers hear these words a lot. I was in the choir. I was on the altar guild. I used to be more active in church, but I just can't find the time anymore. You see, there are lots of worldly temptations around that simply will choke the spiritual life right out of you. Elvis Presley was one of the greatest entertainers of all time. He owned a purple Cadillac, a pink Cadillac, 2 Stutz Bearcats, lots of motorcycles, go-karts, golf carts, 2 airplanes, one with Lisa Marie, the name of his daughter, painted on the side, the other with the words Hound Dog 2 etched on its exterior. It was said that one night Elvis had one of his planes make a trip to Denver to simply pick him up a peanut butter sandwich. Elvis Presley had every opportunity that money could offer. In his mansion at Graceland, he had a pool room, a racquetball court, where there's a huge statue of himself given to him by one of his recording companies. He had 18 #1 records in his career and sold more than 1 billion copies of records during his short lifetime. Even years after his death, 500,000 people a year journey to Graceland just to see that place. He achieved more fame and more fortune than anyone could ever hope to achieve. But what meaning did it add to his life? Someone said Elvis Presley was like a little boy seeking approval from those around him. And when he couldn't get it, he would suffer from bouts of depression and self-doubt, just longing to be loved. After I had prepared my thoughts for this sermon last night, I saw in the news where Whitney Houston died. One of the most beautiful voices in the world, but troubled to the point of having no focus on life whatsoever. My friends, if you permit your heart and your soul to be divided in so many pursuits that it allows your seed to fall among thorns, your life might end up just as empty and broken as the king of rock and roll. Jesus said finally, however, there are the seeds that fell on good soil, the kind of rich, loamy soil that contains the right mixture of sand and silt and a little bit of clay, the soil that every farmer dreams of, the kind of soil that you can pick it up and it just flows right through your fingers. No hardness, no rocks, no thorns, just good, fertile soil. And it is that kind of soil that represents those who are receptive to the Word of God. These are God's people who hear and act, and those who bear spiritual fruit. And this is the kind of fruit that attracts others. This is the kind of fruit that reaches out and touches other people. This is the kind of fruit that Paul describes in the Galatians as the fruit of the Spirit. That is a spirit of love and joy and patience and kindness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. I think all of us from time to time have occasions in our lives where we allow our faith to drift away from God. You know, it's sort of like the tourists we see here in the summer. The people who aren't really familiar with what that giant ocean out there is all about. And so they go to one of the beach stores and buy one of those $5.99 floats and get on it and take a nap. The next thing you know, they're waking up to hear the lifeguards whistle because they've drifted too far out of sight. Our faith is like that sometimes. We find ourselves doing the same thing in our relationship with God. And we wake up and we discover that we've moved too far away from Him. Maybe because we're too busy, perhaps we're too preoccupied with worldly concerns. Sometimes perhaps it's guilt. Whatever the reason, we're not producing good fruit. Leroy Elms, in his book, The Lost Art of Disciple Making, tells the story of an experience he had in a restaurant one morning. It says, one spring, our family was driving from Fort Lauderdale to Tampa, Florida. And as far as the eye could see, there were orange groves, trees loaded with fruit. And when we stopped for breakfast, I ordered orange juice with my eggs. I'm sorry, the waitress said, I can't bring you orange juice. Our machine is broken. First, I was dumbfounded. He said, here we are surrounded by millions of oranges. I knew they had oranges in the kitchen. There were orange slices garnishing my plate. What was the problem? No juice, hardly. There were literally hundreds of thousands of gallons of juice just waiting to be picked. The problem is they had become dependent on a machine to get the juice. Then he writes this, Christians, he said, are sometimes like that. They may be surrounded by Bibles in their homes, but if something should happen to the Sunday morning preaching service, they'd have no nourishment whatsoever for their souls. You see, the problem is not a lack of spiritual food. It's that so many Christians haven't grown enough to know how to get it for themselves. We're fast approaching the season of Lent. Today is, thanks to Jason, we have one more week in pre-Lent, and then we'll be into that very holy season. And there's a time of year that we're supposed to take an inventory of our spiritual lives. We're supposed to closely examine our faith and get a good grasp on just how we stand with our Lord and Savior. We're supposed to use this special time of the year to be honest about our fruitfulness. And we do that through prayer and confession and sacrifice. We want to make sure that our spiritual lives are indeed fruitful. And the responsibility for doing that belongs to each and every one of us. But on that good ground, Jesus said, are they which in an honest and good heart, having the word, keep it, and bring forth fruit with patience. My friends, check the ground around you and use the Lenten season to improve your crop.